and chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Karen Bass. Congresswoman, Madam Chairperson, you worked with John Lewis. You were the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. You worked side by side with him. He was called the conscience of the Congress. We say that quickly on newscasts, right, but explain why he was called that and how he played that role.
Absolutely. Well, you know, when he was in a hearing, when he was on the floor, when he would get up to speak, it was the moral authority that he commanded always. I want to share a funny story with you, because one time there was one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle submitted an amendment that was going to cut the funding to help with voting rights enforcement. And I guess Mr. Lewis must have been in his office and heard about this amendment, and he comes rushing down on the floor of the House, and he gave one of his, roaring speeches. My Republican colleague went back on the floor, apologized publicly, and withdrew the amendment. It was the moral authority with which he always spoke, that I don't care what was going on, everybody would stop and listen to him. I think he was the most respected person on the Hill, in the House, in the Senate, Democrat, Republican. Everyone respected him. And it's a ritual that many of us would experience every year, going across the bridge. And every time we would do that, it was always a bipartisan group of people that would go. It lasted over 3 days. You know, you've been many times before. And it was the collective experience that he would lead that was life-changing for so many of my colleagues. And it certainly was for me as well when I went.
Now, you wrote on Twitter this morning urging the president that, quote, while the nation mourns the passing of a national hero, please say nothing. Please don't comment on the life of Congressman Lewis. Please let us mourn in peace. Of course, the president didn't listen to you or human decency, allegedly tweeting this afternoon, quote, saddened to hear the news of civil rights hero John Lewis passing. Melania and I send our prayers to he and his family. But he said nothing about the Civil Rights Act that John Lewis became legendary for helping to get passed the first time and wanted desperately to see it upheld now. He said nothing about the George Floyd policing justice bill that you helped engineer through Congress, which John Lewis was a big advocate for. I think that John Lewis would not want to tweet. He'd want to see the Congress act on the things that made John Lewis known and respected all over the world.
Right, but Rev, the reason why I did that tweet was because, and I feel very strongly about it, I didn't want him to say anything, because you and I know if he opened up his mouth to say something about John Lewis, it would be offensive. And we don't need that right now. He can't say anything about any issue without bringing it back to himself. And I know that he would have been critical in some negative way. We just didn't need his negativity today. I don't mind what he tweeted. Maybe what I tweeted, helped him say minimal about him, but I hope he leaves it as that. We don't need to engage him in a conversation. We don't need that right now. The nation is mourning the loss of an icon. People around the world know the difference that Mr. Lewis made in this country, and we need to leave it at that. Now, he's lowering flags for a day. I hope that the flags are lowered until Mr. Lewis is put to rest. It needs to be for more than a day. But, let's just keep him out of it for right now. He can stay on the golf course.
And I think also we don't forget some of the ugly things he tweeted about John Lewis when John Lewis was among us physically. The same President Trump denigrated him on Twitter many times. Let me ask you, what is the plans that you and the Congressional Black Caucus and Congress has to fight for the things that John Lewis fought for? Where are we now with the legislation that he so supported in such an energetic and committed way all the way to the end? Even when he was suffering with pancreatic cancer, he never stopped fighting.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I think Senator Harris has it exactly right. Naming the Voting Rights Act after Mr. Lewis and getting that done in the Senate, I think that's exactly what should happen. And for that matter, she also mentioned the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. We passed it out of the House. It is languishing in the Senate. Now, it's on top of a big stack of bills right now because you know there's over 200 bipartisan bills that Mitch McConnell has not moved on. But what he needs to move on immediately is the HEROES Act. He needs to move on the HEROES Act because our people are dying. You saw that we hit 140,000 Americans are dead over the last few months, and you know what a percentage of those Americans are African American, Latino, Asian Pacific Islander, and Native American. The fact that 140,000 Americans are dead is because of the way he has mismanaged the pandemic from the beginning. So the first thing that needs to happen is the HEROES Act needs to pass, the Justice and Policing Act needs to pass, the Voting Rights Act needs to pass, the Senate needs to go to work. That's the bottom line. The only thing Mitch McConnell wants to do is confirm conservative judges that have the potential to be there for the next 40 years.
Congresswoman, Chair Lady Karen Bass, thank you for being with us this afternoon.